In the summer of 1854, London was among the most advanced cities in the world. Its population had surged past 2 million, its industries drove global commerce, and its institutions shaped policy across continents. Yet, beneath this progress lay infrastructure that had not kept pace. The city's waste systems, designed for a fraction of its current population, discharged directly into the Thames. For decades, this arrangement had functioned without catastrophic failure. That summer, the system broke. Cholera had visited London before. Outbreaks in 1832 and 1849 had killed thousands, but the disease remained poorly understood. The prevailing theory held that cholera spread through bad air, or miasma, rising from decomposing matter. This explanation seemed plausible. The Thames smelled terrible. The poorest neighborhoods, where sanitation was worst, suffered the highest death rates. Medical authorities, civic leaders, and scientists largely accepted miasma theory because it aligned with observable patterns. John Snow, a physician in Soho, disagreed. During the 1849 outbreak, he had traced infection patterns and noted that cholera victims often shared a water source rather than simply living in areas with foul air. He published his findings, proposing that cholera spread through contaminated water. His evidence was methodical, his argument clear. It was also ignored. Miasma theory had institutional weight. Snow's water theory did not. In late August 1854, cholera returned to Soho. Within days, more than 500 people died within a few blocks of Broad Street. Snow mapped each case, noting their proximity to a public water pump on Broad Street. He examined records, interviewed families, and traced the paths of those who had fallen ill. The evidence pointed to the pump. Snow presented his findings to local officials and urged them to remove the pump handle, making it unusable. They complied, skeptically. The outbreak slowed. Despite this, Snow's conclusion was not widely accepted. Removing the pump handle had coincided with the outbreak's decline, but correlation did not persuade those committed to miasma theory. Officials noted that the epidemic had already been waning. They argued that panic had driven people away from the area, or that weather patterns had shifted. Snow's evidence was seen as interesting but not definitive. The pump handle was eventually replaced. The broader failure was not one of malice but of framework. Miasma theory explained what people observed in ways that made intuitive sense. Bad smells, poor neighborhoods, and disease appeared connected. Water, by contrast, seemed less suspicious. It was drawn from the Thames, yes, but so was water across London. Why would one pump be deadly while others were not? Snow's answer, that sewage had leaked into the Broad Street well, required accepting that invisible contamination could kill. That explanation demanded a conceptual shift that most were not ready to make. London continued to grow. The Thames continued to receive waste. By the summer of 1858, the situation became unavoidable. Decades of untreated sewage had saturated the river. Heat intensified the smell to a degree that halted daily life. Parliament, whose windows overlooked the Thames, could not function. Curtains soaked in chloride of lime were hung in a futile attempt to mask the stench. Newspapers called it the Great Stink. Lawmakers who had delayed infrastructure investment for years now faced the consequences of that delay in the most immediate terms. The crisis forced action. Engineer Joseph Bazalgette was commissioned to design a sewer system that would divert waste away from the Thames. Construction began in 1859 and continued for years. The project was expensive, disruptive, and vast in scale. It required demolishing streets, rerouting waterways, and building over 80 miles of main sewers. Bazalgette's design anticipated future growth, incorporating capacity far beyond what seemed necessary at the time. His system redirected sewage eastward, away from the city's core, treating the river as something other than an open drain. Cholera outbreaks in London declined sharply after the new sewers were completed. Deaths from waterborne disease dropped. The Thames, though still polluted, no longer functioned as a direct threat to public health. Historians suggest that Bazalgette's infrastructure prevented more deaths than any medical intervention of the era. Yet the system was built not because Snow's evidence had convinced authorities, but because the stench had made inaction politically impossible. The cost of the delay is difficult to quantify precisely. Thousands died in outbreaks that better sanitation might have prevented. Decades passed between the identification of a problem and the implementation of a solution. The expense of building the sewers, while substantial, was compounded by the cost of waiting. Disease continued. Resources were spent managing crises rather than preventing them. The longer the delay, the greater the scale of work required. What made this a systemic failure was not ignorance, but the persistence of a framework that fit observed facts without explaining their cause. Miasma theory was not irrational given what was visible. It simply was not correct. Institutions built around that theory resisted alternatives, even when evidence accumulated. Snow's work was precise, but precision alone did not overturn consensus. Change required a crisis large enough to force reconsideration. The lesson, if there is one, lies not in blaming those who believed miasma theory, but in recognizing how systems of knowledge resist correction. Evidence that contradicts accepted frameworks is often dismissed, not out of stubbornness, but because frameworks provide coherence. Abandoning them requires more than data. It requires accepting that previous decisions, made in good faith, were built on flawed assumptions. London's sewers remain in use today, a testament to infrastructure designed with foresight. The cholera outbreaks that shaped their construction are now historical events, studied as turning points in public health. Yet the delay that preceded their construction, and the cost of that delay, is harder to see. It unfolded gradually, in decisions deferred, warnings unheeded, and systems that functioned well enough until they did not. The consequences became clear only in retrospect, once the damage had already been done.